How travelers can use Bitcoin in El Salvador. Hello and welcome back to One Cosmos, where we talk about traveling destinations and all things related to tourism. Please subscribe and click the bell icon to get notified on updates. On September 7, 2021, El Salvador will become the first country in the world to adopt Bitcoin, or BTC 0.3%, as a legal tender. That could open a new age for the struggling Latin American economy, said President Nayib Bukele, the prime mover behind the so-called Bitcoin law. Why create this law? Because Bitcoin has a $600 billion market capitalization globally, and if they do this, investors and tourists who own Bitcoin will come to the country and benefit Salvadorans and the economy. Bukele is basically making an attractive offer for tourists, outsiders, and citizens alike by eliminating a capital gains tax on the cryptocurrency and building a state-backed wallet, which will come preloaded with $30 worth of BTC for adult citizens. The plan is a leap forward for humanity, not just Bitcoin. Already, Bitcoin has brought a revolution to one town in El Salvador, El Zonte on the Pacific coast, where hundreds of businesses and individuals now use the currency for everything from paying utility bills to buying a can of soda. Let's talk about how Bitcoin has elevated tourism in El Zonte. El Zonte is a surfing village on the El Salvador's Pacific coast. El Zonte has no banks and only one cash machine, in a hotel to which only guests have access. In 2019, a small team of Salvadoran volunteers and an American expat started to transform the local economy to run on Bitcoin. Started as a project by an anonymous Bitcoin donor, the town now boasts El Salvador's only Bitcoin teller machine where people deposit US dollars in cash into a personal Bitcoin wallet, then use a smartphone app to send it. Workers now receive their salaries and pay bills in Bitcoin, tourists can buy Papooses with a special Bitcoin payment app, and community projects are financed with Bitcoin donations. According to Jorge Valenzuela, an upbeat 32-year-old surfing aficionado who leads the volunteers, it has changed my town. How it all began. It was the pandemic that ultimately jump-started the project. When El Salvador's tourism industry and El Zonte's economy collapsed, Peterson, a local volunteer, started making monthly transfers of about $35 in Bitcoin to 500 families around town. He used Wallet of Satoshi, one of the many existing smartphone apps created for small transactions using Bitcoin for everyday purchases. As more stores began asking how they could accept Bitcoin, Peterson decided El Zonte needed its own app. The Bitcoin Beach Wallet, which launched in September, similarly uses technology that allows for small transactions. It shows users how much they hold in Bitcoin and greenbacks and where they can spend it. Shops in town price everything in dollars, whether the underlying transaction is in Bitcoin or not. A cappuccino always costs $3.50, even if Bitcoin's value has just jumped or dropped. In this way, it behaves more like a token than a currency. How it all developed. Peterson says that 18 months after the project launched, roughly 90% of El Zonte's households are interacting with the currency regularly. It's crazy how fast Bitcoin has caught on, he says. Businesses are using it on their own to pay bills and accept payments. Residents use transfers to Strike app, the ATM, and peer-to-peer transactions to move money back and forth between Bitcoin and cash. There's a local woman who has turned into a market maker. She buys Bitcoin from town residents when they need cash and then deals it to eager investors, many of who come from San Salvador, where the digital currency has been next to impossible to purchase. People in El Zonte are now using a smartphone app to pay bills, buy groceries, or have their hair cut with Bitcoin, making a direct online transfer to the vendor. What will it mean for Bitcoin to become legal tender in El Salvador? Merchants in El Salvador were already free to accept Bitcoin as a form of payment. Once the new law goes into effect, several months from now, however, they'll be required to do so unless they lack access to the necessary technology. People will also be permitted to pay their taxes in Bitcoin. The US dollar will remain El Salvador's main currency, Miguel Catan, El Salvador's Secretary of Commerce and Investment, said. Goods are to be priced in US dollars rather than Bitcoin, which tend to fluctuate wildly and involve long strings of decimals. The government also intends to set up a $150 million trust at El Salvador's development bank that will allow citizens to convert Bitcoin into US dollars. How is the use of Bitcoin transforming tourism in El Salvador? Since El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele announced last week that he intended to make Bitcoin legal tender, people have been flocking to El Zonte to learn how it works or to invest in Bitcoin themselves. What's different about what's happening in El Zonte is the level of adoption and the circular nature. You see it spreading from family to family and down the coast from town to town. From between 2 and 5 visitors a day, the town's sole Bitcoin converter is now receiving more than 25, said machine attendant Jessica Veliz. Informal trader Jose Rafael Morales traveled more than 100 kilometers to El Zonte to get in on the game. He said, "I have been researching practically since the president announced the news of Bitcoin. The longer-term goals of Bitcoin Beach include creating a well-paying jobs for Bitcoin tourism, attracting investment, and making the El Salvador coastal region a hub for Bitcoin-related tech companies. Their goal is for young Salvadorans to see a future that doesn't involve having to make the journey to the US." How can tourists benefit from this change? Just imagine the number of things you can do as tourists in El Salvador with the Bitcoin currency. You can explore the Coatepec Caldera Lake by going to its shore and hiring a boat for a couple of hours with your Bitcoin money. You can swim in the lake enthusiastically and not worry about dollar payments. There are several wooden piers that jet into the water for boats, and people and the shore is a mix of sandy and rocky, but the water is very clear. When you visit the Mayan ruins of El Salvador, you probably would not expect to pay for the tour and thus might not have bought any money. However, the best way to visit all the Mayan archaeological sites in El Salvador is to go on a tour. A guide is almost essential as there is little information available at the sites and you will miss half of the story otherwise. Thus, you can easily use Bitcoin to pay for the tour. Who would want to take bags and money pouches to a food festival? You can continue along to Hawaii and indulge in its famous weekend food festival and pay with Bitcoins. There you'll find some of the best food in the region, including iguana, snake, and frog and guinea pig dishes. There are also plenty of traditional plates too, such as grilled beef and paella. Wouldn't want to miss it, right? Meanwhile, Apaneca town is the highest habitation in El Salvador and is located at 1,400 meters above sea level. The square of Apaneca has a market with souvenir shops and food stalls, but the main attraction is Apaneca. It's the surrounding coffee plantations with coffee bushes lined in a checked shape and topped with 3 crosses. Apaneca is the adventure and ziplining destination in El Salvador. You can go on buggy excursions or jump on a zip line above the coffee plantations. You can get to Apaneca from Hawaii on the conga bus with live music and a bit like a party bus. Doesn't Bitcoin payments sound amazing for these trips? Last but definitely not least, you can find pupusas in El Salvador everywhere. Eat all the pupusas. It's one of the great joys of traveling and backpacking in El Salvador. Besides, you wouldn't be able to avoid them if you tried. Locals eat pupusas for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Have a Bitcoin app. You can pay for each pupusas easily.